Hello there, friend, and welcome to the podcast. I am so excited that you are here with me today. I know you have lots of choices when it comes to listening to podcasts, so thank you so much for coming back. If you're a longtime listener or if it's your first time, welcome. I'm thrilled to have a guest here today, and we are talking about the Enneagram. And this is part of a series that I'm doing that I'm really just trying to dig into my strengths and really encourage everyone to do this yourself, digging into your strengths and then realizing how you can use your strengths as an entrepreneur is the whole goal of this series. And so I'm not an expert on all of these different types of personalities and all of this. I just wanted to learn about myself. So I've brought on a guest and I'm super excited that she is here today. Amanda, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
It's so much fun. And you were one of the people that we happened to connect and through networking, right? Someone said, oh, you two need to know each other. And lo and behold, we don't just share a name. We share a lot of other things in common too. It's really fun to connect with new people. And throughout that, I think it's important just to share about networking and how helpful it can be. I asked you, I said, hey, do you know anyone who specializes or knows a lot about the Enneagram? I'm looking for someone to have on the podcast. And through conversation, it became you because you
Right.
use the Enneagram with your clients. So, could you introduce yourself, kind of give some context about what you do and then how you use the Enneagram with your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I am an executive and career coach for women. And a little bit about kind of my story. I am 17 years on the corporate track, 16 of those with the same company. And I have had just so many different experiences and bouts with burnout that I went through a whole cycle of different emotions, different career tracks, different things. And then about 2 years ago, was at a point where I was feeling pretty comfortable in my career. And I will talk about this in a little bit, but I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, so I can only stay comfortable for so long. I went through this whole exercise to figure out how I could potentially create some side income to partner up with my corporate career. And long story short, I went through and did a whole bunch of internet research, found something I could create, and came across coaching. And that just checked literally every single box for me. At that time, I was like, oh, I can have 1 to 2 clients here or there, keep my corporate career. That was September of 2022. And fast forward to today, I have completely pivoted my whole career track. I am now solely working as a coach. I work for myself through my own business. I have some corporate clients, I have private clients, but all of the clients that I work with we are creating a career and a life that they love. So we say no to burnout, we say no to guilt and sacrifice, and figuring out how to really get them a career that feels so aligned with their life. And so how that fits into the Enneagram is it's something that I use with every single one of my clients to really understand who they are at their core and how they filter information and what they make it mean. Because we could all be sitting in the same scenario, but all of us are filtering things through our own lens. And so that's what I love about the Enneagram is it really helps you understand the lens that you are filtering information through. And then for those who are in a leadership role, we go through this for people on their team as well. So it's great. I do this in team workshops. I do this individually. Just so helpful to really understand ourselves and those around us a little bit better.
That's fantastic. I think it's really neat to have any type of information, especially if you're a leader of a team, of how others around us are, what that lens is, and how they're seeing things, because that helps us so much relate to people and navigate challenges and change and all of that. So I think it's wonderful. It makes me think back to my corporate days. I don't know when the Enneagram was released, but I feel like either it's newer or it's having a cauliflower moment in the last few years where I feel like it's everyone's talking about it. Because when I was in corporate, it was more like Myers-Briggs and all of those types of personality tests and I had to take them when I was interviewing for a job. And so there was all of those types of things. How would you, maybe compare isn't the right word, but think about the Enneagram as compared to other personality type tests?
Sure. And, I don't know that there's like a right, wrong kind of personality test. It's just whatever really resonates most with you. And to be honest with you, and I think you mentioned this too, like I love all of them, to be honest with you. The reason that I use the Enneagram is because it seems to be very straightforward and something that's really easy for people to digest and understand. So it's just based on a number. You're 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 through 9. And with some of those other ones, it can feel a little complicated unless you have a real true expert to dive into everything. And even then, you might not take away all of the pieces with that. And so what I love about the Enneagram, and even the way that I do it, a lot of people are probably used to taking a quiz or a test. And Amanda, I know we had you do this before. But what I like to do is I actually have a handout that has 9 paragraphs on it. And each paragraph describes a person. I actually learned this through my coaching certification, and I loved that approach because all you have to do is read the 9 paragraphs and pick out the one that resonates with you the most. So it's not a really long assessment. It's, and even when we dive into it, I feel like it's so much easier to digest.
Right. That was one of the things that I noted very quickly was I didn't have to take a quiz or answer all these questions. And maybe this is my type, right? So I'm not really sure. And we'll go into all of that. But when I take a test, a quiz, I overthink all the answers. And so I always wonder, could I have answered it differently? Like, could I have gotten a different result? Whereas reading the paragraphs and then just saying, I resonate definitely with 3. But there were a few things in 6 that really caught my attention, is basically what I said in my email to you. And I thought it was so much easier. And maybe that's a personality thing that kind of fits into it. But I felt like it was so much easier to do that. So I really appreciated that approach so very much.
Yeah. And again, I can't take credit for that. There definitely was a tool that I got exposed to during my own coaching certification, but I just absolutely loved that approach. And so that is what I have run with as well.
Right. I love it. I think it's fantastic. Okay, so now what I would love to do is just really dive in. Now, I know that everyone listening is not going to be a 3, which is what I am. So I don't know if you want to go through each of the 9 or just simply say, like, Google it, or we can put it in the show notes or something. But for those listening, it's 1 through 9. There's a number. Now, my one question I will say is, as soon as someone asks me about Enneagram, they start asking me about wings. And so all I know is I'm a 3. So can you maybe touch on the wing part for a minute?
Yeah. And you and I talked about this a little bit too. And I think especially if we want to keep this at kind of that 101 level, I would say y'all just focus on that core number first. Okay. Get that down before you start digging into some of the other things. But essentially it's kind of like your subtype, right? Like your secondary type with that. And of course, just like anything, there's so many layers that you could continue to dive into. I think for the sake of this, like just sticking to that core number. But yeah, I think that's a great question in terms of you hear that a lot. And if you want to do like a really deep dive Enneagram, there's plenty of coaches out there that have, really detailed certifications that can just go super deep if you're like, okay, this is the one that I want to just go all in on. But I think if you're like just kind of working with different personality tests, just sticking with that core number is going to be a huge game changer for you.
I love that you said that and mentioned that, because I think that there's a lot of people who, and not everyone, again, personalities tell us a little bit more about this, but not everyone, but a lot of people would be like, okay, I need to learn everything I can and go all in on this thing. And sometimes it's better just to dip your toe in the water a little bit and just understand the number. And so I really appreciated that when I asked that question before we hit record and talked about it. And I thought, oh, I love that you're telling me just focus on this one number, because that's really the intro level. And then you can decide if you want to learn more. So for everyone listening, you don't have to go crazy with these things. Just learn a little bit. And then if you want to go deeper, you can.
Yeah. And I think the key is being able to absorb that information and then take action from it. Mm-hmm. So if you're feeling overwhelmed by all of the stuff, then you're probably not going to take action on anything or change anything in your life. So I think if you just kind of focus on really that 101 level at the very beginning, figure out how that feels for you, make some of those changes and adjustments, and then you can kind of go deeper.
Fantastic. Okay. So how would you like to start this? Do you want to give an overview of the 9, or do you want to just go in and go to the 3?
Yeah, I think we can do an overview of each one. Because if I was listening to this, I'd be like, okay, I need to at least be able to like think about which one I think I might be, even without going through some of those tests. So I will say with the Enneagram, the numbers of each one are pretty much always the same. The descriptions are like spot on. You might see them titled differently. So like it might be type blah, blah, blah. And that might, the title of that might be different. So I would never get stuck on the title of it. You can name it honestly whatever you want to. It's just the numbers are always consistent. The kind of the core features of each one of those are always consistent. So your type 1 is going to be if you're a perfectionist. So they are the ones that they're very, very hard on themselves. And if they are really honest with themselves, that kind of that core desire is to be perfect. Even if we know that's not a realistic goal, whether, it's a project I'm working on or my life or my career, like type 1 really wants everything to be perfect. They can be ones that sometimes procrastinate on things because it's not good enough yet. So if you were somebody in school who like just wouldn't turn something in because it wasn't good enough, that's typically a type 1. A type 2 is your person who is like usually your most thoughtful friend that you have. They are the ones that put everyone before themselves. And what can come across as just completely selfless. Like they will remember every birthday. They will get a gift for everything. They will always be there to help. What we have to watch out for in a 2 is that they are also filling up their own cup, because then self-care is very, very difficult naturally for a 2, because they want the spotlight to be on everyone else. They want to be focused on everyone else. But we all know we have to fill up our own cup before we can help somebody else. So that's a type 2. Your type 3 is really your achiever. So goal-oriented, they really strive to be successful. They're fast thinkers, like they just want everything to be moving really quickly. They also care a lot about what other people think of them. So as a 3, typically your worst fear is it's failing, but it's not just failing yourself, it's failing where other people see it. It's failing in front of other people. Because a 3 really, really cares about looking good in front of other people. They can also be your workaholics if they're not careful. And they can be what I would consider a chameleon. So like in a group setting, they know exactly how to adjust their personality to get along with all the people, which is great. It's such a great trait to have. Of course, the dark side to that is then a 3 can also kind of lose themselves in that because they're trying to be everything to everyone. Your 4s are kind of your artists, your emotion. They really lead with their emotions, and they are the ones you might consider them dramatic, right? Because they're like their emotion, you know exactly how they're feeling at all times. But they really feel that that's important to lead with those emotions. And so they want to know that same thing from you of where are you at in your, and how you're feeling. And their core is to be unique or different. They do not want to follow the status quo. They want to be their own unique self. So that's a 4. Then you've got your 5 who loves being the expert. So if you have a friend or if it's you yourself that you feel like you always have to research and know everything about anything and your core is to really know things, like you want to be the one that knows the stuff, that's your type 5 or the thinker. They really crave their alone time. But really, again, the key trait with a 5 is they're like the go-to for all information. So if you're like, oh, you know who's going to know something about this? This person. Like you have no idea if they know or not, but you know they probably will. That's your type 5s. Your type 6 is, they're the ones that are prepared for the worst. So I have a friend that's a type 6, and when we vacation together, she's like, okay, so I know where every exit is. I know exactly how we're going to, like, they're constantly surveying for what could go wrong, what could happen, and then they want to be prepared for it. So they're also like your doomsday preparers and like, all those types of things. But they can also come across as kind of skeptical of things right away because they don't just trust openly out of the gate. But then once you earn their trust, they are going to be super, super loyal to you. So with a 6, that is a great trait because they are prepared. They know, like some people are just living out there in la la land, right? Like they know they are ready to go. But of course, we don't want to get stuck in that worst case scenario status. So we want to be able to kind of balance that out with some of that positive energy as well. 7, these are your people who love life. Their main goal here is to have fun and despise being bored or trapped or, like that's their worst. They also tend to avoid negative emotions sometimes because we're just here to have fun. Like I don't really want to dig into that. But they are your idea people. They will come up with just the coolest ideas. And then with a 7, it's then figuring out like, okay, how to follow through with those ideas, because then it's like, okay, super fun, on to the next thing. And that's okay, because maybe you just partner up with somebody who has the follow through, right? And you're the visionary and you can really motivate people to do that. Your type 8s, they are what we would call the defender. So they are your friend or yourself, right? Like they're going to swoop in and defend you no matter what. Like they don't even know what happened, but they're like, I'm here. I got Amanda's back. I'm going to go to battle for her, right? That's your type 8s. I always picture them as like literally wearing that superhero cape. Like they just want to swoop in, and if they feel like something is unfair or someone's been wronged, they are going to go to battle for you. The downfall, or what we have to watch out for with an 8, is they can also come across a little defensive or even controlling at times. So, and it's not that they want to control people, but they just want to feel like they have control in a situation, right? So that is your type 8. And then finally you have your type 9. Your type 9s are like your peacemakers. They are the ones that do not like conflict. They just want everyone to get along. Like everything is good. Everything's copacetic. And they will be your go with the flow person. So if you're like, what do you want to eat for dinner? Like, I don't care. What do you want to have? Right? Like they're never going to typically chime in with that because they just want it to feel like everything is good. Of course, the thing we have to watch out for with that is that, again, we don't lose our own opinions and our own thoughts in just trying to avoid conflict, because we know there's going to be conflict and we can't just always side skirt that. But your type 9s are just like the ones that just get along with everyone and, just want to keep the peace. So I know that was quick and long at the same time, but yeah.
It was great. It was awesome. It was so quick, but very descriptive. And the reason I say that is because I could think of someone in my life for all of them. And I think that's when you know that that was a really helpful, like real life description versus only focusing on whatever the title says. Because I do, when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, I can imagine getting hung up on a title like, but that doesn't describe me. But the paragraph did, right? So I totally get it. I don't know if people listening heard me when I said I'm a 3, but it's it's probably pretty clear to everyone that that is the case because I help people set and achieve goals, which makes me laugh so hard.
You have
So,
found your calling.
yeah, I mean, but it's so funny because I did not think about this. Like, it's not like you were talking about, you know, stumbling into entrepreneurship and really trying to figure it out. I did the same dang thing. And I talk about it on the podcast with everyone I talk to. It's like, how'd you stumble into this? Because I feel like sometimes we just have to take one step forward. And funny enough, like that's what I ended up doing and focusing on is helping people set and achieve goals. So I'm curious what you think about that.
Yeah, I think it's funny because once we were talking and then you came across with what you know, what type you resonated with. And I was like, yeah, like that's 100% what I thought you were. But you never want to, you know, put that on somebody else.
Sure.
You always want them to be the one that discovers that. And sometimes we're wrong too. So you never want to be like, oh, I think you're a blah, blah, blah. But yes, I think for you, like a 3, goals come natural to a 3. Achieving comes natural to a 3. And it feels, and I'm a 3 also, and it feels easy to us. And so what's interesting about that and what I love about what you've done is you figured out that that's your superpower and that it doesn't necessarily come easy to everyone. And that's where I think is really key. And when I'm working with my clients, it's like, we almost overlook the things that come natural to us because we think like, well, I don't really have to think about that. So like, isn't that obvious to everyone? And as we were going through, everyone has a different superpower.
Right.
And so it's like, what are the things that come easy that then you realize, you know what? I don't know if that comes easy to everyone. And I think you've done such a beautiful job of figuring that out and then making that your life's work. Because when people, especially when people are like thinking about starting a business or even a career path or whatever, I always ask them like, what do people come to you and ask for advice on? Or what do people naturally want to know your thoughts on? That's your superpower. And I bet even before you started your business, right? Like that was something you could naturally help people with.
But I didn't even think about it. Like it was definitely not, it's not what I started my business around. But it was very clear when I look back. It's so funny. Like you and I were just talking about how I'm doing this whole revamp of all this stuff and looking back at blog posts from 2017 when I started, I was talking about goals in 2017. Yeah. I just naturally talked about it, even though that wasn't what I was super focused on in that moment. I talked about it from the beginning, which is so fascinating to me, but I didn't see it. And so I think one of the things that I love that you're honing in on with this, which I'm kind of taking us on a tangent, but I'll bring us back, is that there are people who listen to this podcast all the time who are like, I know I want to start this business. I'm not sure what to do. I've got all these ideas. Usually it's because they have a lot of ideas and they're not sure which one to go with. That's the answer, is the one, the lowest hanging fruit. But it's really hard to see. At least it was very hard for me to see that. And I don't know if someone would have told me, Amanda, you should help people set and achieve goals in 2017. If I would have been like, probably not. I don't know what I would have said at that moment.
Yeah. And one, an exercise that was told to me a long time ago that I love, and I've done it now a couple times throughout my career, is if you're struggling with figuring that out of like, or you've got that imposter syndrome of like, oh, I think I'm good at this, but am I really good at that? Do people really, do people really think I'm good at that? One of my favorite things to do is to put out to your network, whether that's on, social media or LinkedIn or just asking around, ask the question, if you heard, and I'm always like, it's a hypothetical, but if you heard that I was delivering a TED Talk or I was writing a book, what would you expect the topic to be?
That's
and it's
so
so
good.
eye-opening of what, I mean, the responses are typically different, right? But you can see a trend through that of like, I guess they do see me as an authority in goal setting or, fill in the blank. But that exercise was told to me when I was very first starting my business, and it was so, so helpful in getting over some of that and that feeling of being an imposter and getting clarity on, okay, what are some of the things that obviously come more natural to me than they do to other people?
Right. I also think it would be a really good pulse check of like the person who, and I've experienced this a few times in my business, who like, but through pivoting, right? If I had asked that question at one point and hadn't made the pivot yet of the messaging, everyone would have said the thing before or whatever the case is, and seeing that lens. Whereas it's like, that's a good pulse check of like, okay, I haven't talked about the new thing enough. I got to talk about the new thing a little bit more.
Yes. Yeah, because you're also, and you get into like personal brand a little bit, but you are also priming your audience for, hey, here's what I love talking about. And that's what I work on with my clients when we're talking about careers, because I work with corporate clients and entrepreneurs. And even with corporate clients, it's like we focus on like, what would people say about you if you weren't in that room? Like what project would they volunteer you for? What would they think you want to be doing?
Right.
And so when we figure out what we are passionate about, what we're really good at, and what we love doing, then the more we talk about those things, the more we put those out there, it's also kind of priming people to be like, well, yeah, of course Amanda's the expert in that. Like, that's a no-brainer. She talks about it all the time. She's got a great point of view on it, whatever the thing is.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love it. Okay, I'll bring us back to Enneagram. But I feel like all of that comes into play when
It does.
It like intertwines.
Yeah, because, it's not just going through this and being like, oh, cool, that's really interesting. Yes, I've always, thought this way. But it's like, okay, then how do you take that and put that into practice in your business, your life, your career?
Right. And that's the other part, which I'm curious about. So I obviously focus on goals and like, this is clear type 3, right? It's also like, and maybe that's the achievement part of it, is like the follow through is there. And I hear people tell me all the time, they're like, Amanda, when you set your mind on something, like it is almost impossible to change it. Not in terms of like an opinion, like my opinions can change when I am educated on something. That's not the case. It's like the other day, I was really trying to fix a faucet, which is, by the way, not my skill set at all, at all. I should have called a plumber. It did not work. But Michael was like, you aren't giving up on this. He was like, we can just call a plumber. I don't know why. I don't know why we're still talking about this. And you've gone to Lowe's 5 times. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it is. And it's so funny because similarly, I had a friend say that to me one time too. And it just clicked for me of like, oh. Because just like you said, like she's like, like when you say you're going to do something, like you do it, you go and do it. And I was like, yeah, I guess I do.
Doesn't everyone?
So sometimes it takes that reflecting back to you of like that is different than how other people operate. And again, you could fill in the blank for any other number of, like, how like you just show up for every single one of your friends. And to them, that feels like a no-brainer of like, well, of course I do. Like,
right.
Of course I do.
I think about all the wonderful people in my life who always remember things. And they're like, Amanda, I know that this is a really hard day for you because
yes,
you lost someone in your family. And I'm like, I have no idea how you remembered that. And I have to work really hard to try and do that, which I try to be a really thoughtful person, which maybe is negating the thing. I don't know. But it's like, I'll have to like set reminders and do all these things where it just seems like, I mean, I'm saying it in such a way where maybe it seems weird, but it's like, I almost envy some of the other traits that are so hard for me. Like if I send you a birthday card and it makes it on time, like, no, I worked really hard to make that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And so again, I think it just goes back to the things that come easy to you. Mm-hmm. Lean into that. And we'll talk about, the things there's a healthy version and an unhealthy
Right.
version, right, of each one of these numbers, but that's your superpower. That is your superpower, and it doesn't just come naturally to everyone.
Right. I think, I mean, for each of the 9, when you were talking about it, I was thinking of a family member or friend, each one of them, like it was pretty quick. And maybe I'm wrong. Like you said, like I don't want to assign a number. I'm not going to call anyone out. But thinking about it in that way was like, oh, the things that come easy to them. And it's like, I wonder if they know that that comes so easy to them, whereas I have to work really, really hard at it. But what I thought of for this entire series was we all, like you've said several times, we all have strengths, and I believe we all have weaknesses. But if we can capitalize on the strengths and really use that in our life and as an entrepreneur in any facet of our life, I think we'll be like fighting the friction a little bit less. Like you said, like saying no to burnout, that sort of thing. Like I find that when I'm really exhausted and got that short fuse, because impatient is part of being a 3, apparently. When I saw that, I was like, well, check that right off. When that's creeping in, I'm like, okay, I'm trying to recognize like, well, what's causing that? So I can try and, I don't know, help it in any way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things, especially from a 3, that I think, well, there's a couple of things we need to watch out for as a 3. One of those is pushing people too hard because we are so goal oriented and such achievers. And again, we don't like things to move slow, but it's like, you're like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this. Let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you're a coach, so we can balance that out very well in terms of.
But I'm sure some of my clients are like, yeah, I understand that right now because Amanda has pushed me. Now fortunately, my clients say I push in a kind way.
Yes.
But what I'm hearing through all of this is like, I need to use that as my strength, but I also need to recognize the other person on the other side of like what they need. And I think I've done that in the best way I knew how without asking for a personality quiz type of an answer, which may be a better option for me going forward. But my initial, and I saw my face actually change when you said pushing people too hard. My first thought was actually not my clients, because I think I balance that better with clients. It's like my friends who are like, I want to do, like one of my friends just said, I'm thinking about starting my own business. And she told me, so, I mean, there's that. And I did not let up at all.
Yep.
I was like, you can do this. You can do this. And I'm thinking about it right now, thinking I should have just given her some space to tell me about it.
Yeah. And probably with our families too.
Yeah.
Like,
I thought about that too. I was like,
yes,
friends and family, I mean, I have to be, and like I bring up Michael a lot because we talk about stuff all the time. Like he'll say he wants to do something, whatever it is, and we all do this. And he tells me this all the time. He's like, Amanda, what you say is true. When I really care about it, I'll do it. Because that's become my thing of like, when someone in my friend or family group will like say, oh, I want to do this. And if they've said it for a really long time, instead of me trying to support in a way of like helping them, I say, when it really matters, you'll do it. Like, that's what I know. That's what I know. And I'm like, oh gosh, maybe I say that too much.
No, but it's so good. And I love that awareness, because I always say the same thing. I'm like, I'm not your friend to just like, if you don't feel like you're going to take action or follow through on it, don't tell me about it. Don't tell me about it.
Don't tell me, because I'm going to really help.
But it's recognizing. And I think that's what's so important of like, I've gone through this with every, each person in my household,
I
with my friends, with like those people that I'm close to. And so now I can think of, okay, don't filter this through Amanda's lens. What do they need in this moment? When I work on this with my clients, we also talk around how to communicate to somebody of that number as well. Because when you communicate to somebody the same way that you would want to be communicated to, that's not necessarily always the right answer. Now, being a coach, that's a people, they opt in, they sign up for that. Like that's
paying you to
that
do it.
is what they're looking for. But sometimes our friends and family aren't always looking for that every time.
My friends and family don't really listen to this, but maybe if they are, they're like, yeah, I can't tell Amanda anything. Because if they do, I'm not going to forget it. It's not like I'm going to forget it by next Thanksgiving. I'm going to ask you, did you finish that book? How's it going? I'm going to text you on a regular basis and ask you about it. And so I think people have just decided maybe we just don't tell Amanda these things anymore.
Yeah, I literally just had a neighbor and friend. We were talking about something and she was like, yeah, she's like, I'd love to, like to do a call with you or whatever. She goes, but I know you're going to make me do things I don't want to do. So
yes.
I'm like ready to do it yet. I was like, fair.
I love it. And maybe that's really like we've found our calling. Yep. Being a coach, it sounds like if you're a 3, you probably want to be a coach in some way. And because that's what people need. They need that. And they, in my opinion, probably need it from not a family member or a friend. Sometimes a friend can work. Like I have definitely worked with friends, but they had to be super ready. And to see me as the coach, right? They had to see that lens. I have one of my really good friends and she is like, at some point she wanted to start a business and I said, oh, okay, look, let me just meet with you. And she was like, no, I need to pay you in order to do this. Like I have to pay.
Yep.
And she had to see me as the coach. It was a really interesting experience. Yeah. She did great.
Yeah. And it's almost like that conversation of like, are you just wanting to vent? Or do you to try and fix this? Or do you want my opinion? Or, so it's like kind of starting out conversations like that when it's a personal conversation. Because sometimes they are like, hey, you know what? She probably knows what she's doing. Like, let me talk to her about this. But also sometimes people just want that friend or daughter or mom or wife or whatever. And they just want to vent or just want to talk about it and they don't want it to be fixed.
Right. Take the coach hat off.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. So, we've talked a lot about me, how I'm showing up. I would love to know, because we're recording this in August of 2024. And what I'm going to do is actually release this in October. And so I am going to implement, not surprising that I'm a 3 and want to implement something that you tell me to do. This is what I'm learning. So I would love your thoughts on what could I do? What is something, maybe one, maybe a few things that I could do or watch out for, like something that would really help me over the next month or so. And then what I'll do is come back and record an update.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so maybe 2 very tactical things, because I think like tactical is just the easiest to be able to say like yes or no. Did I implement it? Yes or no, did it work? Yeah. So the first thing that I would say is celebrate the wins.
How did you know I was terrible at that, Amanda?
Because you're a 3. All of them, the big, the small, the in between, every single milestone, celebrate it. The reason why this is hard for a 3 or takes some practice with a 3 is because we are so goal oriented. So by the time, like you might have a goal that's that pie in the sky goal, but once you get there, now you've already moved on mentally to that next goal. So this one that at one point seemed like it was just going to be the end all be all, no longer is. Because you already have your sights set on the next thing. And so it's very easy to just kind of skip over that or be like, oh, that's really cool. Okay, now moving on because I still have this whole other thing. And when are we ever going to finish that? You know what I mean?
Never.
Because there's always going to be the next thing. So big, small, all of it, take time to consciously celebrate it.
Okay. It's one of these things, like I'm sitting here thinking, I didn't even have a book launch party.
Yeah. Yeah.
You and I even talked about this before. And I was like,
yes.
I didn't even do that. Not that I wasn't proud of it. I was just moving on.
Yeah. You were probably already like, it didn't seem as big to you as it did when you first started that process. And so we really have to be conscious of sitting in that and celebrating ourselves, because one of the quotes that I love so much, I wrote it down right before this so that I would not forget it, but it's you for a 3 is you are here to enjoy life, not just to finish it.
Ooh, that's really good.
Right? And if we're constantly always just looking at what's next, we're not being present in the current moment. And we're not enjoying truly what we have right now in this moment. So that would be my first tip, is to celebrate all the wins, big, small, all of it.
Okay, I'm going to have a list. And so
Yes.
this is my tactical brain. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a list. I'm going to be emailing you in a month with the list of things, because if I don't, I won't do it. Like that will slip on past. I will not do it. But if I hold myself like to, I'm going to do this to get into the habit, but I'm also going to tell you, that'll be helpful.
Because a 3's core fear is failing in front of other people. So if I know you're going to send it to me, that's why I do the same thing. I speak all my goals out loud, and it's mostly so that I do them.
See, that's using, and I think a lot of people, like when I read that, like that, a 3 myself, I worry about what other people think. And I think, gosh, I've worked so hard in my life to not focus on that. But what you just said was just use it. Use it as a amplifier here. Don't worry about the fact that it's like part of who you are.
Yeah.
Use it to your advantage.
Absolutely. Yes. That's what you'll see. Like I speak every single goal, everything I'm working on. I always say it out loud. I'm not the person that works behind the scenes on it, because I'm like, well, now everyone knows I'm doing it, so I have to do it.
Right. Oh, I love it. That's perfect.
Okay. The other thing that I would say is maybe do an exercise and really see how you are prioritizing what's important to you in your actions. Meaning, you might say, okay, what are the things I really value? Oh, time with my family, friends, having fun, doing this hobby, whatever the things are. And I would say, okay, if I were to look at your calendar right now, would I be able to see that's your priorities? Or does it reflect maybe all work, or what, like, is it truly where are we spending our time where we say is most important to us? Because again, as a 3, we can tip the scale a little too far when we are working towards a goal. Everything else, like it's kind of almost like we get those blinders on because we're just so focused on that goal that then all the other things fall to the wayside. And, our spouses can only sit on the sideline for so long and take the back seat to a project, or, our kids or our friends or whatever. And so really finding that balance of, okay, yep, I'm working on this thing. It's got these, blocks of time in my calendar. I say my calendar because I use my calendar for literally everything. But then it's like, how much family time do I have on that calendar too? How much time for me do I have? How much time do I have for rest and because rest is another one that's really hard for a 3, because rest doesn't feel productive.
It sure doesn't.
Yeah, but it's so, so crucial, right? Of just doing something without a goal, without a result tied to the other end of it. So that would be my other tip, is just really being super conscious of where are you giving your time and your attention to, and is there's a time for work, and there's a time for fun, and there's a time for rest, and there's a time for family, and making sure that all of those are getting their fair share.
Well, I hear you loud and clear. All of that resonates.
Okay, good.
It's amazing how it's like, oh yeah, like what's happening and all of this. It's definitely things that I've become more aware of. Had you asked me all these questions before I was an entrepreneur, I would not have known quite as much. I definitely was a workaholic, and I don't use that term lightly at all, because it was a real thing. And it was really bad for me in corporate, enough to where my mom and husband sat me down and said, you have to make a change or you're going to have a health problem. This is looking pretty bad. And so it was clear to other people, but it was definitely not clear to me, because I was just like focused on climbing the ladder. Like I was just on to the next step. But I'm more aware of it now. I feel like I've done as an entrepreneur. However, I love my job so much more that I want to work all the time. Like I just love it. So I really have to try and stop. Like I had to put some boundaries in place for sure. Not saying I don't work on the nights or weekends ever, but I aim for like that 70% of the time I do. So we'll see. Maybe what I do, because again, very tactical over here, is I'll see. Am I really hitting 70% of the time? Am I really doing that? Thank you so much, Amanda. This has
You're
been
welcome. Thank you so much for having
wonderful.
me.
So, what I'm going to do is let you kind of wrap this up, and then what I'll do is come back in about 30 days and record my update. I'll also email you so you know what's going on. But for the person who is listening right now, what would you suggest that they do in terms of like if they wanted to learn a little bit more about the Enneagram or about themselves and they had that number of like, oh, I resonate with whatever number?
Sure. I would say, there's tons of free quizzes and assessments online. I would really kind of just take that as through a grain of salt though as well, because there are a lot of ones that could misnumber you, right? Especially, again, nothing against anything that's free, but
Sure.
you do get what you pay for in a lot of situations, right? So if you were truly interested in making some big changes, if you're just kind of curious, yeah, take your free quiz. And there's plenty of Instagram accounts that focus on the Enneagram. There's tons of stuff you can do on that. But if you're really wanting to get some big results, so like, if you really want to change the way you operate your business, if you really want to change the way you operate in your life, if you're, kind of listening to this and thinking like, oh yeah, I think I have maybe some potential blind spots or pitfalls, then I would suggest working with a coach on that. I think when you have somebody who can reflect that back to you, who can see those trends, who can pull that thread through for you and reflect some of those things back to you, that's where you're going to get really the biggest bang for your buck, is when you do that deep dive inner work and some of the shifts that come along with that.
Yeah. And for a length of time. It's not a one and done thing. Anything, I mean, both of us talking about goals, and we're both coaches, obviously. We work with people for a long period of time because nothing is super fast. So thank you for bringing that up. I want to make sure to give you the spot to tell people where they can find out more about you and connect with you, because I know that so many people are going to be thrilled to connect with you, and I want them to do that.
Well, thank you. So I just say Instagram is probably the easiest call to action. If you're on Instagram, it's just at Amanda Riffee _coaching. That's where we have the most fun. And then if you're not on Instagram, my website is acrprofessionalcoaching.com. And I'm sure we'll have all that in the show notes and stuff too.
Everything will be in the show notes. Amanda, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.